Welcome to another Creative Podcast, where creative outcasts come together to share their stories so we can all feel a little less lonely. I'm your host, Janelle Marquez. Hello. Welcome back to another episode. This week's episode is a fun one because it kind of ties in with a few of the topics we've discussed on this podcast before. And this is a bit of an exciting one, especially if you're a new creative or new creator, or even a creative who is looking to start a new journey or a new career or a new passion. By the end of this episode, I hope you'll be able to feel like you're ready to begin and just take the leap. So let's get into it. Raise your hand if you've ever battled perfectionism. Yes, that was me. I just raised my hand. It's truly not unheard of for creatives to battle perfectionism. A lot of creatives are very hard on themselves and they may feel as though they are just never enough unless they're perfect or they're number one. And unfortunately, or maybe it is fortunate, that art is subjective, so something that you may not be proud of or fond of might be someone's favorite new piece of art. So in a way, I feel like this works for and against us as creatives. But when it comes to just beginning something, this is one of those things where you just can't let perfectionism get in the way. When it came to planning out this episode, I kind of got in the weeds a little bit about planning out every single thing I wanted to touch on, and I was revising my notes and I was kind of getting frustrated, and I decided to just say, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna like go off the rip on this one and just kind of hit my points but speak a little bit more freely. And in fact, I think the episodes I tend to do that actually tend to be a little bit better. The only issue is that I do ramble, but once again, you're listening to my podcast, so if that's your thing, it's why you're tuning in. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm just gonna roll with it. Y'all know what I'm trying to say, right? I really just want to talk about like a couple myths that I want to debunk and some thoughts that we've all been kind of programmed to believe are true, which I no longer believe to be true. So I hope you guys can be part of this conversation. I want you guys to be part of this conversation. So don't forget to leave your thoughts and comments at the end of this video or in the podcast episode. You know the things. Anywho, without further ado, let's get really into it. Last week, we touched on how to get out of a creative rut and all that comes with it. But Janelle, what if the reason I'm stuck isn't because I'm not ready? What if it's because I'm waiting to be perfect before I begin? Well, viewer, if that is your question, hypothetically, these are my thoughts. First off, you have probably fallen under the trap of perfection, or the perfection trap. Tomato. I touched on perfectionism a little bit at the beginning of this episode, but because this is a really common thing with creatives, we're just going to knock it out first. And I think it's really important to understand that a lot of the times perfection is fear wrapped in a nice pretty little bow. And when you get scared to embark on a new adventure or a new journey, you're going to feel like you're never going to be ready unless it's absolutely perfect, unless you have the best plan, unless you have all the right equipment, unless you have every single thing and every decision is mapped out and you know all the possibilities of like how this is going to go. Yeah, no, I hate to tell you that's complete bullshit, because a lot of the times we have a plan and things just don't go accordingly. And we can't account for external factors. And a lot of the times our journeys will take us on adventures and directions that we never planned on going. But as a creative, you have to pivot and you just kind of gotta go with it. And that's not always a bad thing. In those times when you're faced with a challenge that you did not account for or didn't see coming, I think that's actually great for you as a creative, because that's where like growth happens, you know? And when you're starting something new, it is so important for you to embrace being a beginner and the messiness of it all. So instead of being afraid of starting something because you're not ready, because the plan isn't perfect, just let that go. Throw all those perfect thoughts and like put them in a bucket and let them stay there, because perfectionism is something that we use as a shield to protect us from failure, from being wrong, from messing up. But those are the things that we need to embrace when we're starting something new. And if you are someone who constantly sits in the perfection trap, I want you to be mindful and maybe take a look within or take a look around and see, is your perfectionism costing you? Like, do you have a bunch of unfinished projects? Do you have all these half-built ideas that have gotten nowhere? Look around, see what you're working with, because if that's the case, we got so much to unpack. But also, maybe that is your sign to just let perfectionism go and stop letting it get in the way of you starting. I know I'm not alone when I say we've all fallen victim to hearing the, oh, you're just not ready, or even telling yourself like, oh, I'm just not ready. Yeah, that is a myth. That is a big fat myth. Once again, take that idea, crush it. It's gone. We got to let that one go. This is something every single one of you needs to hear right now. I want you to like listen closely, because you won't ever feel ready. You truly won't. Most of the time, I mean, maybe you will, but you really won't. I truly don't think any of us ever feel ready. If you see someone new, you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're so ready. It's like they're ready to take on the world. Chances are they're not, or at least they don't feel it. But that's okay, because you just need to take the leap. You need to make a conscious decision and commit to pursuing something, because that is when you are going to actually feel ready. That is when you're going to start getting ready and actually prepping for the thing that you're preparing for, the journey that you're about to embark on. When you commit to starting, that is when you're going to start to feel ready. And you know what? Maybe you will commit to the thing and you still won't feel ready, but that's okay, because you still took the first step in starting. And that's where so many people fail to even begin. Like, think about the times where you signed up for like a dance class or a cooking class or even a college class, and you're like, I'm so not ready for this, but you already paid for your classes and school is starting in the next 24 hours, and you're like, I'm not prepped for this, but you still show up to the class and you still go anyways. Why? Because you're going to do it anyways. Ready or not, you're doing it. And that is what matters most. And for us creatives, I think a lot of us can really vouch for this thought and belief that we actually grow the most through the process of doing something. Like, for example, when I look back at my first photos that I ever took for photography, they were really good for the time that I started. And I'm not gonna lie, I still think they're great photos even now. But as I've progressed as a photographer, my photos have continued to progress as well, because I kept practicing up my skill and I've gotten so much better. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't willing to grow and keep practicing at my art. This is why it's so important to evolve as a creative, because you will grow through that evolution. And sometimes it looks linear, and a lot of the times you're going to go through peaks and valleys, and it's going to be all part of the process, but you have to like embrace that. That's like the scary thing about starting something, is that when you have to go back and be a beginner, you're starting from ground zero, especially as creatives. I was thinking about this even to like myself, like if you're creative and you're starting something new, and let's say you're really good at something, but you want to try something new, it is a little bit weird to start from like ground zero and build your way up. It may be even intimidating, but it's really important for us to embrace being a beginner at something. It's important for us to learn how to take criticism and guidance when we're given it, because that is how we are going to grow. That is how we're going to improve our craft or even evolve as creatives. So yeah, starting something is not always going to be easy, especially if you let go of being a perfectionist and you just dive right into something. Yeah, there's probably going to be a little bit of a bumpy journey. It's going to be a little bit of a rocky road, but at least you're starting, and you can only go up from there unless you don't keep at it, but we'll get there. I'll be honest, I hate being bad at things. That's why I don't like going bowling. I'm really bad at bowling. I'm also super competitive. So like if I'm bad at something, it's not a good time for anyone because I am a sore loser. And I will proudly admit that because yeah, bowling's just not something I can do competitively. But that's besides the point. The point that I am trying to make is that being bad is part of the journey because you can't become great if you weren't bad before. And yeah, there are some of those people who are just naturally really good at things, but a lot of us aren't. And so your story is actually just that much better when you can go back and be like, dang, I really sucked, but look at me now. But once again, that also comes with a lot of hard work, practice, and consistency. But that's all part of the journey, right? So if you're someone who's new at something and you're just a beginner, or you're thinking about taking the leap and starting something new, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to embrace the journey of being a beginner and make mistakes. Ask so many questions. Be so curious. Be so curious. Ask every question that you think of, because there really is no stupid question you could ask except for just not asking. Asking questions is how you learn. And if you find a great teacher out there, you're going to learn so much. So embrace being a beginner. And honestly, if you're a beginner and you're not all put together and polished and you're having a quite ugly start, I say start ugly and embrace it. I don't want you to start ugly with purpose, because when you just show up, not all put together, it shows you care enough about getting to where you want to be, no matter what state you're starting in. And this is a little bit geared more towards my creatives and artists out there. I really want to drive home the point that embracing all the ugly that comes with being new at something, all the rough edges that you may have, that you may even have a chip on your shoulder, and you know what? That's okay too, because that will get polished over time and rounded out. Anywho, the point I'm trying to make is that when I use the word ugly, I want you to understand that what I really mean is just show up honestly, show up authentically, show up with genuine interest in what you want to pursue. That is invaluable, because when you are just a beginner, if you are passionate and you are enthusiastic about your journey, that is proof that you're ready. Take that little fire that you have inside of you and use that to propel you towards your journey. Use that to grow and evolve and learn as much as you possibly can. Because when you start like that, you're able to use that excitement that you have, allows you to start building momentum throughout your growth. And therefore, you're more eager to learn. You're more excited to pursue the thing that you're doing. And most artists, most people genuinely will learn more from doing the thing than thinking about doing the thing. You know? And I really want to drive home that you will learn faster by doing the thing and falling down and getting right back up. As long as you keep trying at it, you're going to get to where you want to be. Whether you're watching this episode on YouTube or listening to this on Spotify, I want to share my own experience when it comes to starting ugly, and I genuinely think I have done a great job at embracing that mindset because, for example, my own podcast that you are listening to right now, I am on episode 15. Well, if you're listening to this, this is the most current episode. So this is episode 15 episodes in, and I started this podcast ugly. I'm not gonna lie. I used everything that I had. I used my point and shoot camera to film this. I was actually propping it up on like this tiny little tripod that I had, and I had that balancing on a kitchen chair with like my laptop on the side with all my notes. And that was because I used my bigger tripod and used an iPhone attachment to like prop it up into like a mic stand. because I was using my phone as a mic. I started this podcast in the most messiest way possible. I fumbled with my mic so often. I also had no branding artwork. I really pieced it together after filming, I think the first 3 episodes, they were already filmed and edited, and I still didn't have a thumbnail or an intro to my podcast. I just remember thinking, I want to do this thing. I don't know how it's going to go. I have a direction I want to go in, and I mapped out maybe like 6 episodes, and I recorded the intro multiple times. In fact, I was so eager and desperate to start this podcast so quickly, and I just went with the best one. And in the best one, it's not even perfect. It's the one that you guys listen to now, and you can hear my dog barking in the background. But once again, I'm trying not to be a perfectionist, so I kind of just went with it, and I've left it, and I've kept it since. I think it adds a little character now that I think about it. But once again, this podcast was just something I threw together very messily. And after a couple episodes, I decided to polish my podcast up a little bit, but I didn't have it all figured out. I still don't have it all figured out. In fact, I have so many things to still polish, like getting my podcast published on other platforms and things like that, but I will figure that out eventually. Right now, I'm just trying to be consistent and do something that is sustainable for me as a creative and the phase of life I'm currently in. But that's what's important. I have figured it out along the way. Like now, my camera is now sitting on a proper tripod. I am actually holding a real mic when I speak. My audio has improved so much, actually. But these are just subtle differences I've made. And these are all things I have figured out over time. My YouTube channel is another example. My first few vlogs on YouTube were all filmed on my iPhone, and I was just still learning how to edit. So a lot of these edits were very similar. I used a lot of music I shouldn't have used, but I wasn't getting any monetization on any of those videos anyways, so I didn't really care. But once again, I started messily because eventually I got new cameras and I've updated my equipment over time. But once again, I figured that all along the way. My editing has gotten better because I've continued to grow and progress as a creative. And speaking of evolving as a creative, my work has evolved so much. And I'm able to see that it's evolved so much because I've continued to work at my craft, whether it be through different mediums, such as a podcast or vlogs on YouTube or shorts on YouTube or reels on Instagram or TikTok, all the things. But because I have so much, I'm able to look back at it and reflect on my journey as a creative. And this is something to keep in mind when you're starting a new journey as a creative or anyone out there really. But when you embark on this new journey, this new beginning, I want you to shift your definition of success, because I think this has been something that's really allowed me to embrace the whole journey of being a beginner at something. Because if you're someone who's really hard on themselves, you may feel like everything you need to put out there has to be the best. Everything you need to have out there has to be perfectly polished and a great representation of who you are as an artist. But I feel like that kind of ruins the journey, because if you're trying to reach this point of success, and maybe success is great consistent work that's perfect all the time, that's not realistic. And it's not really realistic for anyone. And the people who do it, they're probably not the happiest inside, but maybe they are. And it's because they found something that's sustainable for them. But once again, everyone's journey is completely different, and we all may have different definitions of what success is. And it's really important for me to understand and embrace that the idea of not every single thing I put out there has to be perfect. I sleep so much better at night knowing that. And I hope some of you guys who are hearing this can also feel that way. Being a beginner is not easy. And aside from, changing your definition of success, I also advise a lot of creatives to remember that your first draft is not your final draft. You will find the success you want through multiple revised drafts or different versions of what you're creating. What you first end up with does not have to be the end. You're allowed to change an idea. You're allowed to restart. You're allowed to do whatever you want to do. You call the shots as a creative. So remember that. Remember that you get to decide what the finished final product is. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And to kind of tie my last two thoughts together, creating consistently is better for you as a creative than creating perfectly. This is a thought that has been so hard for me to wrap my mind around, because as a perfectionist, I feel like every single thing I put out there has to be like the best of the best. But this is a mantra I tell myself all the time. Done is better than perfect. And it goes along with what I just told you guys. I want you guys to constantly be practicing your craft, because that is how you will grow. If you keep trying to produce perfect stuff, how do you evolve? How do you grow? You just can't. And that's not fun. Where's the joy in that journey? No, seriously, where? Because I haven't found an ounce of happiness when it comes to falling into my perfectionist tendencies. So to end this episode on a positive note and leave you with some actual tangible things you can run off with, here are some things I just want you to remember. First off, embrace the cringe and all the weird bumps in the road you're going to hit when it comes to being a beginner, because trying is cool. Being a beginner at something is also very cool, and we should embrace it more. I also want to encourage you all to just create for fun, create with no external pressures in mind, and just make shit that you don't need anyone else seeing. Let your brain just kind of do its thing, and you never know where that will take you as an artist. Trust me, I have made some things that I'm like, yeah, I don't know if it's really my style, but then ended up loving it. So have fun, experiment, enjoy the journey, get weird, embrace it. With all those things in mind, I also just want to be here to remind you to be kind to your mind, because I think we as creatives can truly be our own harshest critics. And especially when you're new at something and you're not used to being a beginner, it can be really hard. But it's part of the journey, and everyone at some point has to start somewhere. And you truly can only go up if you're just starting. So don't be so hard on yourself and have fun with it, Anywho, I hope you guys picked up something from this episode. We definitely will be talking a little bit more about this topic towards the end of this season. We have 5 episodes left until the season is over, which is very cool because I'm excited for season 2. It's going to be very interesting. We'll talk about that later as well. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.